Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Dorning. I'm one of your hosts today for the Statewide PD&E Industry Forum. I'm just going to wait a second for the attendees to populate, and then we'll get started. Just give me about 30 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and get started with some housekeeping items. A lot of us are pretty familiar with this. We do use the new look of GoTo. We used it last time if you were in our last industry forum. Um, The controls are at the bottom and the right of the screen, and there's a questions icon. You can see that it's circled here. Um, if you have any questions for OEM, you can type those in at any time, and they'll be answered during the Q&A at the end of the forum. And if you have any questions for our guest presenters, you can type those in at any time during their presentation. We'll try to ask them, but if for some reason we run out of time of the presentation, taking up the majority of their time, we will make sure that they get them and can get back with you. If you have a phone or a tablet that you're working from, you can see the questions pane is at the top, or the questions box is at the top, and you can just click on that if you want to do the questions there. And if for any reason you'd have any technical difficulties, you can always message us in the questions, or you can go to the GoTo support website. They're always really helpful. So, with that, I would like to introduce Jennifer Marshall, Director of the Office of Environmental Management, to start the forum.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this third industry forum that we're having. We're so excited to have all of you here with us today, and I'd really want to say a big, huge thank you to ACEC and our consultant partners who are presenting today, and we're going to get some great information from the consultant perspective. I'm not going to talk very long. We have our time at the end. But I also want to take a moment to thank all the folks at Adkins who have put countless hours into helping us organize this. And just to go again and say how much we appreciate our consultant partners, as well as all of you who join into the forum. So, with that, I will turn it back to Jen for the agenda.
Thanks, Jennifer. So today we're going to go through, have Sylvia with ACEC give some highlights. We have some thematic presentations from the consultant partners. And then we'll also take a break at that point, probably just about 5 minutes. We'll play it by ear. And then we have some OEM announcements, and then of course the question and answer period. That is always a great part of this. And then we'll have our closing and be done at 3:30. And before we get started, we do have, I guess, to start us, we have one poll question here, just to kind of get everybody ready to go. So just checking in, describe your day. How's it going? I keep seeing that, is it Friday yet, pop up. Um, understood, understood. Oh, a lot of people are hanging in there too. So that's great to see. We're going to have poll questions throughout this forum. I think we have like 7 or 8 of them. So just to help stay engaged and just to kind of keep it a little more interactive. So Sarah, you can go ahead and probably end that one. We like to see that there's pretty good chunk hanging in there, but we're really looking forward to Friday. So with that, I would like to introduce Sylvia Beltry with ACEC to go ahead and give us some information about ACEC.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sylvia Beltry with Ardura, and I serve as the co-chair of the ACEC PD&E subcommittee. I'd like to first thank Jennifer Marshall and the entire Office of Environmental Management for giving ACEC an opportunity to be the focus of this forum. Together, we continue to look for ways to improve collaboration and forge stronger partnerships, and hope that today builds on those efforts. ACEC is the voice of engineering in the Sunshine State, bringing together more than 300 engineering companies representing more than 20,000 employees. When Jennifer first reached out to see if our committee would be interested in presenting, we got together as a group and started brainstorming some potential themes. We wanted to open it up to anyone who was willing to share a best practice or a lessons learned across our industry So with that in mind, we did a call for presenters that went out through our email distribution list, and I also announced it at our quarterly transportation meeting. Our committee also reached out to the districts and coordinated suggestions with OEM. We also polled you. If you registered, then you got some questions to ask you what you wanted to hear about. And this is how we came about the thematic presentations that you will hear a little bit about more today. Next slide. Thank you. But before we do, in the last forum, I provided an overview of ACEC, what we do, how we're organized in Florida, how we communicate to foster partnerships with FDOT, and just a little bit about us in general. So it's always good to recap just because we may have some new attendees, and we always like to encourage participation from our industry partners. So to that end, a few friendly reminders. There are outstanding project awards that are selected in 8 categories. 2 of those categories is what we do here. One for PD&E and planning project. Incidentally, Beth Beam from Santa, congratulations, you won that for this year. You will be hearing from her a little later on. And best environmental project as well. Every district, Florida's Turnpike Enterprise, and central office can submit for those awards. We also have a regional meeting combining 2 districts that rotates every 9 months around the state. That next meeting is going to be held October 3rd, combining districts 2 and 3 in Tallahassee. Next slide. The PD&E subcommittee falls under the Transportation Committee. The current committee roster is shown here, although there it is. I don't know if it's a delay on my side or yours. Consultants working in planning or PD&E are encouraged to reach out to any member of our committee for any concerns or issues that you may have. Please remember that issues are always kept anonymous. There's also an opportunity to present during one of our committee meetings. So if you have a best practice, even if it's within another state, feel welcome to reach out to us. We're always looking for best examples from our sister agencies to learn from. Next slide. Recent updates from our overall transportation committee include bi-weekly instead of quarterly meetings with the liaison committee, with the members shown on the slide. A request has been received from FDOT management for consultant firms to get more engaged on legislative issues, and also a request for us to improve statewide communication to our partner firms. We're working on both of those. Some things to look out for coming up is the next PM conference anticipated in June of 2025. This year's conference was extremely successful. As a reminder, the intent of that conference is to partner up-and-coming project managers on both the FDOT side and the consultant side. So your new up-and-coming PMs, it's a 50-50 audience. It's great for them to attend and start building those relationships. There's also mutual gains training is also under development and is coming soon. Tongue twister there. Next slide. So if you would like to join our committee, we actually have an opening coming up in June of 2025. We do begin the vetting process at the beginning of the year, and we're going to ask for a few items, including a questionnaire similar to the one shown here and your resume. So if that's something that you're interested in, feel free to reach out at any time from now until then, and we'll start the process in January. Our goal is to make sure that we have consultants that represent each geographic region in the state, as well as a range of firms from small, medium to large. Next slide. If you recall from our poll, we asked you what your top 2 choices would be for topics. Unique engineering challenges or resource resolution was the topic selected as the most for your top choice, while building consensus and public engagement was the topic selected the most for your second choice. Partnering with FDOT was also requested very often. Next slide. Combining all outreach methods, including discussions with districts and central office, we're happy to present the following themes and presentations. For building consensus through public engagement, we will hear from Phil Schwab on Southwest 10th Street in District 4. We'll also hear from Victor Mucharuza on LPGA Boulevard in District 5. For unique engineering challenges, we'll hear from Beth Beam, representing the Sebastian Inlet Bridge PD&E study in District 4. For partnering with FDOT, we will hear from JJ Jacquin for US 98 in District 1. And finally, for environment and honoring our history, we will hear from Amy Streelman for the Old 7 Mile Bridge rehabilitation in District 6. As time allows, we will provide Q&A either during the sessions or after. Next slide. Since time limits how much we can cover today, we are very grateful for all suggestions provided that will help us inform the future forums. Other topics requested included unique project engagement and techniques, training, as well as innovative design approaches. So thanks for those of you that allowed us to reach out to you, and don't be surprised if we don't call you soon to inform our next forum or possibly our next PD&E subcommittee meeting. So always interested in hearing project examples and sharing successes. So thank you once again to Jennifer and OEM, and looking forward to hearing from all of our presenters here today.
Thank you so much for that, Sylvia. Some great information. And before we begin with our thematic presentations that Sylvia mentioned, we are going to give another poll. So you'll notice these polls are now themed to the topics of the presentation. So we're starting off with public involvement. So in the spirit of public involvement, which most represents you on the day of a public meeting? We'll leave it open for about a minute. So true, so true. I mean, I'm a public involvement person myself, so I agree. It really can move the needle. But it can also be good dinner entertainment too. All right. As you see, we like to keep it light in these polls. Thanks everybody for participating. Sierra, let's go ahead and get the final count. All right. Thank you, everyone. And now we will hear from Phil Schwab at RSNH on Southwest 10th Street. Phil?
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I'm going to talk about the Southwest 10th Street project, which we were able to successfully complete a PD&E study on. On the cover here, you see that it actually was made up of two separate projects. One, the connector that ran from the Sawgrass Expressway just west of 95, and then 95, you can see it incorporates the interchange. So if you go to the next slide, I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of the project and talk about this community oversight advisory team that really got the PD&E going, and then some of the strategies and benefits we saw, particularly when we went virtual as a result of COVID, and some of the reactions we've had and listening, and not only listening, but hearing the community, and some closing thoughts. Next slide. So Southwest 10th Street, this is basically a missing link. You see the cyan color there, that's limited access highways with State Road 869 to the left is the Sawgrass Expressway, ties into the turnpike. When it was originally planned, it was meant to go all the way to 95. It got shut down by community opposition. And you're going to see in the next slide a number of attempts to try and get that connection made. Currently is a local arterial road. And as you can see, there's a strong, heavy movement that wants to go from the east to the west, and a return movement from the west to the east, 51,000 trips a day in that particular direction. So all that traffic is forced into a local road that now has to share the road. And so there's several incidents that have occurred, accidents along that arterial that has a number of signals along the way. It's about a 2-mile stretch between those. Next slide. Yeah, so as I mentioned, they had planning of the Sawgrass Expressway back in the 70s. They actually opened in 88. Since then, the DOT tried a couple of studies, one in 93, to put in that missing link, and the MPO voted against it. And then again in 2008, where feasibility was completed, but the MPO would not prioritize the project. So as traffic got worse and worse, the MPO took the initiative with the department to develop a community oversight advisory team. In 2015, they came up with several recommendations that were made in order for the DOT to move forward with a new study in 2017. So if you go to the next slide. Just real briefly, this is the existing corridor. It's a 4-lane divided. There are a number of signals along it, but when they had laid out the sawgrass, they actually had sufficient right of way for the most part along this corridor. Next slide. So the code officially provided recommendations that if these recommendations were incorporated into the PD&E, they would support a PD&E moving forward. So they had several recommendations, and if you go to the next slide, this helped formulate the purpose and need, where they talked about categorizing those 18 recommendations. They were about safety, aesthetics, traffic relief, and connectivity, as well as minimize the noise impacts and of course, avoid environmental impacts and minimize the construction impacts and provide multimodal accommodations. Next slide. So before I jump into that, because uh, the big opposition and one of the things that came out of that coat was, and I didn't have it available, they had a watercoloring of a depressed roadway. The idea was that, okay, we'll let you put in a limited access roadway here, but you got to put it underground or cover it or depress it. And so that was a lot of the expectation of the MPO and of the coat as the PD&E moved forward. So as the PD&E got started, we held an alternatives public workshop, and as the team had developed um, the different alternatives, they looked at the depressed section and the amount of impacts that depressing a section would create. It actually introduced a lot of right-of-way impacts. We had to deal with the drainage, so we would have to have some type of pumping system and so forth. So we presented a lot of the impacts as well as different alignments, a center, a northern alignment, and a southern alignment. So through that workshop, there was emphasis to reduce the number of impacts, which actually helped us create more of a range of depressed elements as options, so we wouldn't have to depress as much roadway, and we settled in on the northern alignment. So we did a lot of public outreach and went to an alternatives public meeting number 2, and we still got a lot of pushback. So if you hit the animation. So one of the things that happened was we realized that with this new express lane system, we would need to allow trucks. So after the workshop, we made a decision to allow trucks, and you'll hear a little bit more about that as we move forward. There was also an overpass that was directly in front of a connection, a T connection from a community into the Southwest 10th Street corridor, where they didn't want the bridge there. And I'll show you a couple of examples in just a second on that. And then they also wanted the connector lanes not to be tolled. Anything that would put more traffic on the local lanes, they did not want. That's why they wanted the trucks moved up there. They didn't want the trucks on the local lanes, and they wanted the connector lanes not to be tolled, not to discourage people from using it at all. And then through that alternative public workshop and afterwards, we had selected on what was really the most minimal depressed section, which was the westbound depressed ramp as the preferred alternative. And if you click one more time, this is just an example of that waterways entrance, that community entrance. We knew that they were concerned about the bridge in front of the roadway, but we made it aesthetic. We tried to do as much and keep it as open as possible so people could see through, and we thought we were doing well, but it still wasn't good enough. So what we did after the workshop, if you click again, we actually, sharpened up the pencils and so forth, and we figured out a way to move the profile to the west and still make the connections we needed to the west. So we were able to eliminate that. So with these decisions we made after the workshop and with what we had handled at the waterways, we felt pretty confident we had addressed the concerns and we're ready to move forward. So in October of 2019, if you hit a click, the city and the MPO started raising concerns, so we decided to postpone, one more click, postpone the public hearing. So we had to regroup. What do we do? If you go to the next slide, we decided we really needed to understand the concerns. We thought we knew the concerns. We thought we had made some very good decisions to address them, but it wasn't enough. So we had multiple meetings with the city of Deerfield Beach, who was the primary vocal person or entity that was really fighting for uh, what they believed in for the project. And we sat down with them a number of times to make sure we understood the challenges. So as we went through this, we got into more detail where now they were concerned, and they had brought this up before, but we didn't gauge the magnitude of it, that they wanted the express lanes or the new connector lane on 10th Street to connect to the general purpose lanes and not just the express lanes. And a lot of that has to deal with trucks would have to shift over and use the local lanes and so forth. And they just wanted to get more traffic off the local roads. And they also went back to, which was really one of the Coke comments about multimodal. So they wanted more of a complete street element in the project, and they were concerned that there wasn't enough depressed sections in the project, and they wanted more green space as well. They felt that if we depress sections, we'd get automatic green space, but as we worked through the impacts and who would maintain things and what exactly you would put on a depressed section, it wasn't going to be a lot of green space or park area or anything like that that you've seen in some of these other areas. And they wanted full access to the turnpike. So if you advance to the next slide. So for the connection to 95, the district had made the decision that we will make that connection. We did a layout. We showed we could fit everything within the right of way of the interchange and still make that connection. We did cost estimates, and the department made the decision to move forward with those additional connections. We showed how it would work traffic-wise, the benefits we received, and they made that decision. The complete street elements, we were able to incorporate a shared use path throughout the limits of both projects. So that was a huge benefit to be able to fit a 12-foot path throughout the limits. And as far as the not enough depressed section for the roadway, if you click on that, we can't necessarily say we checked the box, but we did explain all the challenges and the impacts, because that actually introduced more right-of-way impacts, construction challenges, utility relocations, business relocations as part of that. So we really went into depth about why those impacts really you weren't getting the benefits they thought from a depressed element. And then from a not enough green space, we actually created another option, which actually reduced all depressed elements on the project. But by doing so, it gave us more space that we could give back to the community, some nice buffer area and green space, and really allow for somewhat of a meandering shared use path through that area. And then as far as the connection to the turnpike at the time was still looking at express lanes, but they had dropped that idea. So it allowed for a more full access from local Southwest 10th Street to the turnpike. So we felt we were in a real good spot. We went over this with the public elected officials. They were really on board, but wanted to hear from the public. So we felt we needed to have another meeting. So if you do a click, we wanted to do a large public meeting before a public hearing, just to make sure everybody understood what the latest option was and the benefits and challenges with it. But then COVID hit. So we really had to react and figure out, what do? We just gained this momentum. This is a very controversial project. Delays were just going to kill the project. So we moved forward in the next slide, and we had to go virtual in a big way. And we wanted that virtual to be the same experience that people had in an in-person meeting, meaning we wanted to be interactive with them. We wanted to make sure that they were getting their questions asked, and we heard them and follow up with them and so forth. So we planned a lot. We looked at everybody's role in a meeting. This paper that we had developed actually got approved by District 4 as well as the Central Office Secretary Tebow at the time. But we really planned everything out, and that was a big benefit. So everybody knew what their role was going to be, so we could execute and really give people that user experience that they would appreciate. Next slide. So we had a plan for the meeting and we wanted to get notifications out. We wanted to make sure we reached everybody. So when we sent out postcards, I think we had over 15,000 between the two projects that it went out for. We did the regular federal process with the notifications to elected officials and Native Americans and so forth. And we did an e-blast to our database, which had over 1,000 people in it. And we took advantage, really take advantage of the city website and their sources, as well as all the different HOAs and getting the word out. We did yard sale signs, basically just small signs that we could produce fairly easily and put those out at the entrances and exits of all the different communities along the way. And the HOAs did help with and promote the meeting in their distribution lists and websites. And as part of the virtual meetings, we requested people submit questions. They register and submit questions, which was a huge benefit as we move forward, because we were able to take those questions, organize them, and really develop some graphics specific to those questions. But out of over 100 questions, they really narrowed down into 7 major categories that we could present on. So if you go to the next slide. So we had over 800 people in the virtual meetings that we held ahead of the public hearing. When we had our in-person meetings, we had around 200 people. So it was a huge increase in the amount of participation, which is a benefit, because typically out of those 200, of course, you're going to have a ton of consultants showing up and the DOT personnel themselves. But the people that show up typically are the ones that are going to be complaining about different things. And so the virtual allows those that don't want to put that whole effort into going to an in-person meeting, but do support the project, do want the project to support and be able to broadcast their support in a larger group, which was very beneficial as we move forward. We also did surveys, and what we found from the surveys was that over about 3/4 of the people really prefer the in-person meeting over the virtual meeting over the in-person meeting. So that's another good thing as you move forward is figure out, keep surveys very simple and direct, but make sure you're going to be able to interpret the results of the survey, but make it easy for the folks to fill out, and make sure that you're going to be able to interpret it the right way. So keep them as simple as possible and don't overload the survey results. So what did we learn? If you go to the next slide. One more. So with your meetings, whether they're in person or virtual, you want to make sure you're interactive. You want to be able to listen to the people, make sure you hear what they're saying. The elected official briefings ahead of time are a must. You really need to know from the local officials. A lot of times they may not tell you too much, but they want to know what the community is saying, because sometimes they're not as in touch as you may be for a particular project. You want your website to be somewhat interactive where you can get some feedback. And of course, meet with the different agencies to make sure you understand the restrictions, the concerns that the different agencies have along the way. When you provide information, of course, ensure that it's accurate, and you want to be able to demonstrate impacts and benefits. Sometimes we have to go into quite a lot of depth in the impacts, so people understand the efforts that you're doing behind the scenes to try and address concerns and why you may not be. And I say, listen and hear. You hate to go into a meeting and people tell you, yeah, you're listening, but you're really not hearing me. So repeat what they're saying to you, make sure you understand, clarify their comments. And then ultimately, when you make decisions or tell them you're going to do something, document those commitments. Next slide. So again, we emphasized in meetings after that, in advance of the public hearing, that you spoke, we listened. We emphasized the things that we changed. People want to know that you're listening and you're hearing and you're reacting and you're responding. So don't shy away from it. Give them the credit. They pushed you and you made a better project out of it, and it's better and it fits in with the community. So we emphasize, we moved that waterways entrance. We incorporated a 12-foot shared use path. We created more buffer space and landscape opportunities. We weren't tolling the connector lanes, and we were also allowing trucks in the connector lanes. And then we added those connections to 95 that also helped move more traffic off of the local lanes. So the next couple slides just kind of give you some of the graphics that were prepared to help explain the project, because sometimes you just can't get it until you see a picture. And even then, you don't want to take for granted people understand everything you see there. But what you see is what the proposed Southwest 10th Street connector lanes are on the right-hand side, which is limited access facility. So this will be 60 miles an hour along 10th Street. And then the local roads are on the left-hand side. And you can see the 12-foot shared use path. You can see where we have a nice buffer area and noise walls. And there's actually some substantial trees that you see right behind the noise walls. Those are existing trees. If we were to go with a depressed section, even the depressed ramp section, that was going to have to require right away from that community there that would damage out those trees. It would also relocate those power poles. So if you go to the next slide, we start pointing out some of those benefits of what we have on that. And again, you want to keep focused in on those benefits and how you're trying to address things. So as you can see, it's the 12-foot shared use path, no impacts to the existing trees, they can remain. The transmission poles don't have to move closer to the residents, and we've increased the buffer from what they've seen in the past. So next slide. And this is just more of a close-up from the street view of that same area, but this time you're switching directions. And again, we emphasize those things, those benefits that you're getting from it, and increase that buffer space. Next slide. So in closing thoughts, again, set goals. What do you want to get accomplished with your virtual meetings? And plan. Challenge each other on doing things better and making sure everybody understands their roles and responsibilities, and have redundancies. You know, if somebody's sick, somebody's computer's not working, how are you going to deal with that? Develop a way to communicate behind the scenes so that you can kind of handle those things that'll happen, because nothing goes smooth, as we all know how to control the speakers. Even though you want to have an interactive meeting, you do need to have control over the audience. So you want to make sure that they understand that and where they'll have opportunities to talk, so that they don't get impatient. And when they do ask a question or a chat, respond to them right away. Tell them you got it. Stand by. We'll be answering it shortly. If not, please let us know. Understand how to use all those different features on it, and think ahead, right? Maximize the time that you have, and also be prepared if you have extra time at the end. If you've set an end time, how you want to deal with if they're not participating, how you want to fill in that time, or at least provide some beneficial information. Next slide. So I had mentioned earlier, I was alluding to don't take terminology for granted. As you saw, it took us to our second alternatives workshop before we realized that the public realized that express lanes meant no trucks. So that was a bit of a surprise when we got to alternative workshop number 2, that's when they realized that, hey, trucks weren't going to be allowed in these express lanes. They got to stay on the local lanes. And that definitely got people a little frustrated. So don't take some of the terminology we use all the time for granted, and avoid the check the box mentality. Follow up with the public, make sure they're understanding. And if they have an issue, try and draw out exactly what their concern is so that you can address it. We were getting a lot of general type questions, particularly around that time period where you're not addressing the COAT comments. Well, the COAT had 18 recommendations, and some of those had 10 sub recommendations underneath it. And it really was hard to figure out what they wanted. And so those meetings, really getting to the specifics of what they were looking for, helped us focus the team and be able to address it or explain why we couldn't address it. So it made for a much more beneficial communication. And the public, even though they may not like the project that much, they're willing to accept it. They understand the need for the project and what we went through to try and address all their concerns and accept the project. So I can't emphasize the need for strong communications and follow up with people. and don't ever try and tell them how they feel. You're not in their shoes. This is their community. This is where they live. You have to show that empathy and understand where they're coming from, and just make sure that you understand what their concerns are and help figure out whether you can address them or not. And it's okay not to have all the answers, but do the follow-up. Next question or next slide. So as far as exhibits, you want to make sure that they're appealing, easy to open and download, and clear labeling. Uh, I like to test the exhibits with, I say non-professionals, but it's really people, everybody on the team that's been working on it. That's great for them to review, but get it to somebody who doesn't see these things every day and make sure it's clear to them, and that'll help you really make it public friendly. We took great advantage of fly-throughs and animations. We did a lot of movements in there, very slow and methodical with labeling to make sure people understood how traffic would move and circulate in certain areas. And we would do voiceover presentations. We did a combination because we were working on the fly a lot of times as we worked through the process, but it gets difficult when you do a number of virtual meetings and you're continually going through same information. It's good, but it also is a bit challenging in that you tend to miss things from one meeting to the next. Shorter the videos you make, if you're posting something on a website, the shorter you can make it, more concise, the better. Next slide. All right, so that's probably over 15 minutes, but I tried.
No, you're doing good, Phil. Thank you so much for that information. Very comprehensive. And we do have one question from the audience for you. So, lightning round, were the surveys conducted online or in person?
They were online. We did that as part of our virtual meetings. We had already held the 2 public meetings, in-person meetings, the alternative workshop number 1, alternative workshop number 2, as far as major meetings. And then as part of the virtual meeting, we wanted to get as much feedback as we could because we had 3 consecutive virtual meetings scheduled, and we figured we would need to do virtual for the public hearing as well. So we wanted to try and learn and adapt from that at what worked well and what didn't.
Makes sense. Thank you for your answer. And Justin, thank you for your question. All right. And it looks like we have 1 or 2 more questions, but I will send those to you privately for Phil to answer. And we're going to move on to the next presenter. So, Phil, thank you so much. And we're actually going to skip our poll question so we can get right into our project from District 5 with Victor Machuruza from HDR. Victor, take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So District 5 fully embraced Secretary Padu compass in delivering community-centric projects. The district prioritized engagement with communities at every stage of project development to shape its projects, building trust with the partners and achieve shared goals. Today, I will highlight some of the unique aspects of the LPGA PD&E study as an example of how building sustainable relationships with communities and garnering their support help District 5 deliver innovative solutions to its projects. Next slide, please. LPGA Boulevard is in the city of Daytona Beach in Volusia County. The project involves widening of LPGA Boulevard for approximately 6.2 miles, replacing Tomoka River Bridge and modifying the I-95 interchange. Next slide. The area has experienced unprecedented growth in recent years, transforming from a rural area in the 1980s into a hub of multiple major development, as highlighted on this slide. Many more are being planned and are coming. Transportation demand has increased and congestion has grown significantly over the years and is expected to get worse in the future. Additionally, the corridor has severe safety issues which arise from congestion. Given these needs, the project is well needed by the residents and business alike in the project area. Next slide. So the community came together to solve the problem. In response to the community call, a coalition was formed between the Federal Department of Transportation, River to Sea Transportation Planning Organization, City of Daytona Beach, and Volusia County. All parties contributed financially to advance this project. One of the unique aspect of this project is it was born in the community. FDOT program PD&E study and design phases, and is diligently working on identifying construction funds. Our strong relationship and active engagement with local leadership has enabled us to develop mutually agreed upon solutions that everyone can support. Local leaders are also assisting us in effectively communicating the right messages to their constituents. Next slide. So in our approach, we conducted a detailed demographic analysis to understand the community and to inform effective engagement strategies as opposed to using a checklist based on a one-size-fits-all approach. For instance, we engage differently the two census blocks highlighted here by simply looking at their access to internet and computers. We also use modern day technology to understand the community needs. For instance, we apply technology to monitor social media and gauge public sentiment. Listening is the foundation of a good communication. Often, we listen to answer, not to understand. We change that approach by taking time to analyze and understand what we are hearing. Next slide. We listen and gathered input from as many residents, business owners, tenants, and local organizations as possible through canvassing outreach of grassroots efforts and discussion with each business one-on-one and visiting residential communities and presenting at their HOA meetings. This approach was critical where many residents lack access to computer and internet. The community has expressed appreciation of the grassroots level efforts. Our relationship with community, including businesses, help our effort to develop and sell innovative and context-sensitive solutions for this project. As the project progressed, we communicated with the members of the public through a transparent, respectful, and inclusive process that allows us to make collaborative decisions. This is a 360-degree approach to plan and design LPGA Boulevard in harmony with the community to make it safer for all users. We held a hybrid alternative public open house in March 2023. About 350 people attended and we received more than 110 comments. The word crowd summarized comment themes that we received. Overall, the community wanted the project. However, there was some concern on some of the improvements that we were presenting. So at the public meeting, the project team increasing engagement effort by separately meeting with the Latitude Margaritaville, Mosaic, and LPGA International communities to listen to their concern and clarify our improvement. Next slide. Then we held a hybrid public hearing in October 2023. 61 people attended and we received 11 comments. Most of the public comments were appreciating the coordination that occurs since the public open house. Fewer people attended because most likely the community agreed with the changes that were made during post-open house engagement. After the hearing, we engaged with the Eagle Crest community, a new community that was opened the spring-summer of 2023. Most of the residents missed the engagement, including the open house. We met with them a month after the hearing to educate them about the benefit of modern roundabout that we are proposing in front of the community. Their responses were very positive. So this slide here shows some of the proposed improvements along LPGA Boulevard. The first section, which is shown in yellow between US 92 and Timber Creek Road, will be widened from 2-lane to 4 lanes and 14-foot shared use path on both sides of the road. The second section up top, shown in blue, between Timber Creek Road and Williamson Boulevard will be widened to 6 lanes and 12-foot shared use path on both sides. Turn lanes are also planned to accommodate heavy turning movement in these intersections. Near Tomoka River Bridge, the right-of-way is narrower. However, all bridge improvements are optimized to be within the existing right-of-way. Next slide. Here's a picture view of the existing Tomoka River Bridge, which will be replaced with a 340-foot new bridge. The new bridge will match the 6-lane section that I described previously, and also to enhance wildlife connectivity, 2 wildlife shelves are proposed beneath the bridge. Next slide. In terms of intersection improvement, we use the intersection control evaluation or ICE process to evaluate several intersection concepts that would improve safety and reduce congestion. In addition to traditional signalized intersection, we analyze modern roundabout, restricted crossing U-turn or R-cut, through cut, median U-turn, which are more effective and safe. Next slide. This slide here shows the modern roundabout where we are warranted over traditional signal at the following intersection: Walshing-Gabato Circle, South and North, and International Gulf International Tennis Drive. Unlike traffic circles, modern roundabouts are specifically designed to prioritize safety and traffic flow efficiency. They operate on a yield system, which eliminates the need for full stop and ensure a smoother, efficient flow of traffic. So given that the roundabouts are new in the area and Volusia County in general, our post-public open house engagement effort focused on educating residents about the difference between modern roundabouts and traditional traffic circles. Some of the residents in this area, they are retirees coming from Northeast, where roundabouts are being replaced with traffic signals. So this was one of the concerns that they brought that to us. We clarified that those are actual traffic circles, and we highlighted the safety and operational benefits of modern roundabouts we are proposing in comparison. Traditional signal control is proposed at Tomoka Farms Road, Outreach Boulevard and Technology Boulevard, and the Williamson Boulevard intersection. During the public open house, we introduced innovative concepts designed to redirect certain movement at the intersection. A restricted control U-turn was initially proposed at Tomoka Farms Road intersection, and also a through cut, which prohibits through movement at the intersection, was proposed at Technology Boulevard and Outlet Boulevard intersection. After more in-depth evaluation and careful consideration of community feedback, District 5 decided to retain this intersection as traditional signal, accommodating all movements. Next slide. In terms of the interchange, and there's a typo there I'm seeing there, the proposed I-95 interchange is an innovative concept called signalized turbine interchange. It borrows the characteristics of a freeway-to-freeway interchange and split diamond interchange. The on-ramp, left turn lane are separated to improve capacity of the ramp terminal intersection. Also, the off-ramp left turns are tucked under the side of the bridges, then they intersect LPGA with the two-phase signals. Next slide. This slide here shows a close-up view of the interchange rendered image with the camera located above Holiday Inn, more at your left bottom corner of the slide. The bridges are separated out to provide longer queue storage for turning vehicles without interfering with oncoming traffic. At the interchange, LPGA will operate as one-way pairs. This is how we will realize increased capacity. Another benefit of this interchange is the reduction of the number of conflict points where the ramps intersect LPGA Boulevard to enhance safety. Next slide. Another closer view of the northbound off-ramp. And again, I put a QR code for the video for the sake of time. The video is about 4 minutes, so you can access the video at your own time. Next slide. Another view showing southbound on-ramp of the interchange. Next slide. Driving through the signalized turbine interchange is easier and not different from other common interchange types, such as diamond interchanges. An example is located at 3 Mile north of LPGA Boulevard. What we learned from the open house, the public was a little scared by the term turbine interchange, thinking it would allow high speed along LPGA Boulevard or create driving confusion and safety issues. So in our engagement effort following the public open house, we downplayed the use of the term turbine interchange and pressed more emphasis on its operational and safety benefit and clarify its simplicity in operation. Next slide. So
All
to
right.
close, this PD&E study received location design concept approval in February this year. You can follow the link shown there if you have any question. And I'd like to take this time to thank District 5 for entrusting HDR to do this PD&E study, or sub-consultant who had helped us to deliver this project, more specifically to Giabi Consulting and Management for leading engagement efforts. Thank you for your time.
It takes a team, doesn't it, Victor? Thank you so much. We do have a question for you from Kimberly, so we got your question and we'll forward it on to Victor. So we're going to keep moving. And in that, just a really quick announcement. If y'all haven't noticed, there's a bit of a lag today on the webinar. And, you know, we have so many people on, which is part of why that happens. But we are so happy to have you all here, so it's worth it. But if you could show your presenters a bit of support in those reactions, I think there's a round of applause in there somewhere. If you we would love for you to give them a round of applause for dealing with that and putting up with that. We really appreciate them, and for all of you for putting up with that as well. So with that, we have our next poll question. We are moving on to engineering. So our next poll question will be engineering related. All right, and we'll leave this up for a bit. What is the biggest consideration when building your approach to a unique project? Obviously, we're talking about unique solutions to unique engineering solutions. Oh, okay. So we've got several answers in the running here. Having the right experts, environmental restrictions and opportunities. Yeah, that's a big one. And then, of course, community input. Yeah, we covered that today. That's always a big one, isn't it? All right, Sierra, you want to get us total numbers? All right, having the right experts at the top of the list this time. So thank you all. And now we will turn it over to Beth Beam from Stantec to talk about Sebastian Inlet.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Beth Beam with Stantec. I was the consultant project manager for the State Road A1A over Sebastian Inlet Bridge replacement, project development and environment study. And the topic I'm addressing is unique engineering challenges and resource resolution. And along with myself for District 4, the project manager was Binod Basmet. Next slide. So the Sebastian Inlet Bridge is located at the boundary of Indian River County to the north and Brevard County at its southern county boundary. And it's also located within FDOT District 4 as well as FDOT District 5. But the project was initiated from District 4. They maintain the bridge, and so they were the lead for this bridge replacement PD&E study. On the left of this just gives an idea of the project location to the surrounding area. If you go north on A1A off of the image is the city of Melbourne. To the south below State Road 510 is Vero Beach. And then across the Indian River Lagoon is the city of Sebastian and surrounding communities and the Sebastian River. And then in the project location map, you can see the project limits are the orange dashed line. I'm sorry. Thank you. And the cyan line is a gap in bicycle and pedestrian facilities within the project limits. And then the green solid and dashed lines represent either a shared use path or sidewalk located on the west side of State Road A1A. And that is also part of the East Coast Greenway, which goes from Maine to Florida. To the right is the Atlantic Ocean. To the left is the Indian River Lagoon and outstanding Florida water. Next slide, please. So the Sebastian Inlet Bridge was constructed in 1964, and it has been retrofitted a couple of times. The existing bridge vertical clearance is 39 feet, and the horizontal clearance between the bridge fenders is 150 feet. The bridge typical section is 2 lanes, one in each direction, with 2-foot shoulders and no bicycle or pedestrian facilities. And the bridge is also eligible for the National Register of Historic Places under Criterion C for engineering. And it's part of the Indian River Lagoon National Scenic Byway for State Road A1A. And I also want to note in this image, you can see under the bridge there are fishing or observation piers, one located on each side of the bridge. It extends from the park area to the bridge fenders. Next slide. So the purpose of this project was to address the bridge structural and functional deficiencies and address the gap in system linkage for bicycle and pedestrians. The need was that the bridge under the National Bridge Inventory rating system was rated structurally deficient, and the bridge also had a low health index and sufficiency rating. Doesn't mean the bridge is unsafe to travel across, it just indicates the need for replacement. And it supports the Indian River County Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan for State Road A1A at this location to address the gap in bike ped facilities. And during the project, we did do a bicycle and pedestrian count along with traffic, just to be able to assess how many people do use the bridge. And over a 4-day period, we had 231 bicyclists cross the bridge, and they crossed in the travel lane, and 5 pedestrians. Next slide. So this slide is just kind of a snapshot of the environmental and engineering analysis that we completed for the project. Some of the critical analysis was the bridge as far as its vertical clearance, because that really tied to the geometry of the bridge approaches and roadway, as well as the bridge, and potential impacts to the Sebastian Inlet State Park. And if you look at the bottom left photo in this, you can get a good idea of what the typical section does look like. This is on approach in the southbound direction. And a little bit far in the distance, you can kind of see there's a bicyclist going over the bridge also. So, next slide. So the Sebastian Inlet State Park was established basically in 1971. It initially started from donation of private land in this area, and then additional lands were acquired. The park is now over 900 acres. And you can see the cyan line in this image represents the DOT right-of-way. Unique to this project is that the land under the Sebastian Inlet is actually owned by the Sebastian Inlet District, and they were founded in 1919. They're a taxing district that was put in place to maintain the Sebastian Inlet and keep it open, along with some other features and amenities that it does have. I also just want to note that the Sebastian Inlet is not part of the Intracoastal Waterway. The Intracoastal Waterway is to the west in the Indian River Lagoon. It's about 2 miles to the west. But the Sebastian Inlet District, in the recent past, has dredged a channel through a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permit to the Intracoastal Waterway in order to help maintain that navigation connection between the Atlantic Ocean and the Indian River Lagoon and the Intracoastal Waterway. Next slide. So as you can imagine, just based on where this project is located, there was a lot of agency coordination at the federal level, at the state level, and the local level as well. The U.S. Coast Guard, because a bridge permit is involved, is a cooperating agency for this project. Next slide. So very early in the PD&E study, we kicked off coordination with the Coast Guard because we had to be able to determine what that preliminary determination of vertical clearance would be, if we would be maintaining the existing 39 feet or if there was a need to increase the vertical clearance. And as I had mentioned, the Sebastian Inlet is not on the Intracoastal Waterway, which the guide clearance for bridge crossings, the Intracoastal, is 65 feet vertical clearance. So this was a little unique because it's a fixed bridge. There's no bridge tenders, so we didn't have any tender logs that let us know what kind of vessels were passing through the inlet, what the sizes were. So we, in coordination with the Coast Guard and their scope of work that they gave us, developed a strategy to do a navigation survey. And that was an online survey, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. But we used that information that was gathered along with the unique characteristics of the Sebastian Inlet. It has unique bathymetry, it has a skew angle, it is pretty aggressive in its current that passes through the channel. So there were a lot of factors to consider for this vertical clearance in this navigation needs memo. The result of that was that we were going to increase the vertical clearance of the bridge based on that preliminary determination to 51 feet. Next slide. So at the time we began this online navigation survey, I just want to note that there was also a new chapter that was added to the PD&E manual for U.S. Coast Guard coordination. So this was one of the efforts that came out of not only that new chapter, but this unique scope, because the project location was so remote. There were not a lot of residents in the area. So our outreach area for the navigation survey included a mailing of 973 postcards to residents and marinas and users up to the Melbourne Causeway, across to US 1, and down to the Wabasso Bridge area. We also notified it on the project website. It was posted on the Sebastian Inlet District, MPO, Town of Orchid websites, as well as FDOT social media. And then it was advertised in the U.S. Coast Guard local notice to mariners. So the outreach was pretty significant. And we ended up getting 260 responses and 57 comments from that online navigation survey, which we utilized to support the navigation needs memo. Next slide. So this is just a rendering showing the existing 39 feet vertical clearance for the bridge and the proposed new bridge at 51 feet vertical clearance, maintaining that 150 feet of horizontal clearance. And this is looking to the east, northeast towards the Atlantic Ocean. Next slide. And this is just a clean rendering showing the proposed new bridge from the PD&E study. And then you can also see that the underbridge observation fishing piers are also proposed to be installed. Next slide. So early from the project kickoff meeting, one of the primary concerns of stakeholders was, is the bridge going to remain open during construction? Because this is a critical coastal route. Not only residents use it, but tourists, park visitors, emergency services, and bicyclists and pedestrians. So part of our effort to address that was looking at what would the detour look like for this project. So if you follow the yellow line from the north side of the bridge and go north to the Melbourne Causeway, and then south on US 1 to the Wabasso Bridge, and then east back to State Road A1A and north to the south side of the park, that detour is about 55 miles, and the same in reverse. And so, of course, the district that was not an acceptable detour route for this project, nor was it an acceptable detour route to stakeholders. Next slide. So this tied into the alternatives alignment and development and how we would be able to construct the bridge and maintain traffic across the bridge, across the existing bridge, in order to meet the needs of the stakeholders. So alternative one you can see is an alignment on the existing center line. and that was dismissed because that also required a temporary bridge, which increased the cost, increased the time of the project, and also increased environmental impacts. And then alternative 2 is a shift to the west, or I'm sorry, the east or the Atlantic Ocean. And alternative 3 was a shift to the west towards the Indian River Lagoon. And ultimately, after all of our environmental studies and evaluations and engineering, alternative 2, the shift to the east, was selected as the preferred alternative. Next slide. So this all tied into the preferred alternative construction phasing. So the way that it was developed was the existing bridge would remain in place and open to traffic, while the eastern half of the new bridge, farthest away from the existing bridge, would be constructed first. Once that phase was completed, then the traffic would be shifted to the east half of the new bridge. The existing bridge would be demolished, and then the west half of the new bridge would be constructed. And then in phase 3, whatever needed to be completed to finalize the construction of the new bridge would be completed, and traffic would be resume normal traffic patterns with the 2 lanes and the shared use path. Next slide. So this is a rendering. This is looking northwest from the south side of the Sebastian Inlet, and it just shows the 2 lanes, one in each direction for the typical section, shows the 10-foot shoulders, which meet design standards and remove that functional deficiency. And you can see also that those, although it's not typical, but the shoulders were marked for bicycle lanes as well. And then there is a shared use path 12 feet wide on both sides of the bridge. And you can see there's little bump outs, 3 on each side of the bridge, that were put in place to allow people to take a break, take in the views, and enjoy this unique and beautiful project location. And then you can also see the underbridge observation piers are in place. And the poles that you see sticking up, I just wanted to comment, those were installed on the existing bridge back, I want to say, in the 1980s, in coordination with the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, because bird strikes were an issue flying over the bridge and striking vehicles. So those poles actually help the birds fly up and over the bridge and avoid those bird strikes. Next slide. So this is a rendering looking from the south side of the inlet, again, northwest. You can see the South Park entrance. And although traffic didn't warrant any improvements to capacity or lanes or anything like that, in coordination with the district and the Sebastian Inlet State Park, there was talk about improving the safety entering and exiting the park. So a right turn lane was proposed at the South Park entrance exiting the park, and that allowed vehicles that are towing boats and trailers, RVs, that use this area heavily to be able to exit safely. And it also, there's a acceleration lane that's provided in the southbound direction to allow them to move into the travel lane safely. Next slide. And then this is a similar view looking from the north. This is the North Park entrance, looking south across the inlet. And again, similar improvements were made at the park entrance for safety. Next slide. Thank you. I really appreciate your time today.
And thank you, Beth. Truly a unique project.
Very unique.
All right. And we are packing in a ton of information, as y'all can see today. So, oh, yay. Thank you. Thank you for your reactions. So in order to keep us going, we're going to skip right through to the next presentation. But in order to shift gears, we'll do a really quick poll question. Sierra, this one's concerning our next topic, process efficiency. So how much of your PD&E work is with FDOT versus other entities? Of course, this will play into, you know, what their processes are. All right, we'll just give it a minute. 100% is leading the pack. We love that. Everybody loves FDOT. All right. Go ahead and close it, Sierra. All right. 100% led the pack for that one. All right, and I'll hand it over to JJ Jacquin from AIM Engineering to talk about process efficiency with US 98.
Thanks, Siobhan, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today about how we on the consultant side partnered with FDOT to fast track the concurrent PD&E and initial design efforts for this US 98 widening project. I served as the consultant project manager, and David Turley with FDOT District 1 Office, Environmental Management Office, served as the FDOT in-house project manager. Next slide. So this project was looking at this portion of US 98 in northern Polk County from north of West Oakland Loop Road to south of County Road 54, about 9 miles long. It was a rural corridor, 60 mile per hour posted speed limit, and residential and conservation land uses throughout. The facility through this section is a designated hurricane evacuation route. It serves as the primary connection between Dade City, city of Lakeland, and I-4. It's got multiple skewed intersections and was experiencing crash rates much higher than statewide averages. So the department combined this section with 3 other segments in districts 1 and 7 to form this overall US 98, US 301 program. So our segment is down there at the bottom as segment 1. Next slide. The purpose and need for the project was to widen the existing undivided 2-lane facility to 4 lanes so that we could improve transportation network connectivity while eliminating the 2-lane bottleneck, increasing corridor capacity, and improving operational and safety conditions throughout the corridor. Next slide. The existing facility is 2-lane undivided roadway with open drainage. There were no bicycle or pedestrian facilities within the corridor, and we had 160 feet of existing right-of-way. And then you can see we had major overhead utilities running along both sides of the facility through much of the corridor. Next slide. So our project scope and goals were to address the project needs and to conduct a PD&E study, prepare 45% design plans, and to assist the department with the design, build, RFP development, and the alternative technical concept evaluation processes, while helping the department meet a funding timeline constraint imposed by the ARPA funding that all construction funds needed to be expended by December 31st of 2026. So we kind of zoomed out, put together a bar schedule that you see here, and realized that our portion of this project needed to be completed within 18 months. That's that PD&E study and initial design. Next slide. And a schedule like that could only be accomplished through the combined commitment of the consultant team and our department partners. So we quickly identified project champions that could help steward this project through the department review and approval process, helping us to achieve that schedule. So next slide. So for today's presentation, we've categorized the project into these 6 areas that I'll walk through, and I'll show you how we partnered with FDOT in each of these areas to yield the results that we needed to achieve our project schedule. So in the first area of contract execution, on the next slide, I'll go through a little bit of the project. It was awarded to us in November of 2020. And based on the volume of contracts that District 1 procurement was processing at that time, we were not expecting notice to proceed until March of 2021. But in order to maintain schedule, we needed to get out there to get our crested caricara and sand skink surveys conducted in January of 2021. So the clock was ticking. Next slide. So we partnered with our FDOT colleagues to determine how we could advance the seasonal species surveys as well as engineering topographic surveys, geotechnical field work, and preliminary traffic analysis under multiple existing GEC and district-wide contracts. Also to help facilitate the rapid execution of the contract, we pulled out just the critical initial project management, public involvement, PD&E, and design activities, negotiated and executed those, and then executed the remaining services after the initial execution through a series of optional services amendments. The result of that coordination and efficiencies were that we were able to develop the full species survey and design resolution data prior to notice to proceed, which actually came in April of 2021. And that allowed us to begin our public engagement and environmental analysis, pond siting, and typical section analysis activities on day one. Moving into the project management area, this project timeline was compressed. That calls for more project management, not less. So to facilitate that effort, we designated a separate design lead to help me manage the parallel design tasks that needed to take place. And we got together with our FDOT project managers and determined that weekly progress meetings would be necessary for us to keep this project moving. And we required an attendance commitment from key department and consultant staff so that in those weekly progress meetings, we could have meaningful brainstorming sessions. We could make decisions in the meetings. And that resulted in really meaningful coordination completed every single week of that project, not in between the monthly progress meetings, but during the weekly progress meetings. In their stakeholder engagement, we had a number of stakeholders with interest in the widening of this facility, including the many approval and review agencies, the affected communities. We had interested NGOs, including the Sierra Club, and then other transportation departments at the city, the county, and FDOT District 7. And we knew that because this project was funded through construction, that the engagement that we began in the P&E phase would meaningfully continue all the way through completion. Next slide. So we put together this stakeholder engagement schedule that you see here. And as I'll go through the subsequent slide, you'll see that how we partnered with FDOT, next slide, to develop a series of small group meetings with the affected residents. We proactively gave presentations to NGOs, and through the engineering analysis and environmental analysis I'll get to in a moment, combining with the small group meetings and presentations to NGOs, the department was able to determine that no alternatives workshop was needed, and so we did go straight to a hybrid public hearing. The results of all that stakeholder engagement, proactive NGO engagement, is that we received critical project information and early stakeholder support right up at the beginning of the project that helped us to identify locations for the several proposed wildlife features that were introduced into the corridor, and helped us to maintain that project stakeholder engagement schedule that I showed on the previous slide. Under PD&E and design, I've broken this out into 4 subcategories. I'll go through each of those. The first one here in data gathering. We got with FDOT early so that we could understand and come to an agreement about the type and resolution of the information that we needed. And that included the design level topographic survey and geotechnical subsoil analysis early on in the project. And we advanced those critical data gathering activities through those existing district contracts. That allowed us to have high resolution design data on hand when we needed it, so that we could make design decisions very quickly. We didn't have to slow down or pause the project to go back out into the field to collect the information needed to make those decisions. Next slide. Under the environmental analysis component of the project, we very early on established the environmental footprint for this project that was the union of all of the existing and potentially proposed right-of-way for the project. So we did have a number of pond site alternatives that we included in that environmental footprint, and we buffered that footprint an additional 25 feet. We used our understanding of the issues that trigger reevaluations and determine how best to streamline those reevaluations should any be required. And the results are that the minor changes that occurred in the design, including corner clips and TCEs, were able to evolve within that environmental footprint that we'd already cleared. We did have a late phase change in a pond site location, but that did not require any additional environmental analysis. And I'm happy to say that the PD&E studies LDCA served as the construction advertisement authorization for the project, and no reevaluation was needed. For typical section analysis, we needed to determine the appropriate context classifications, target and design speeds. We needed to evaluate the bike and pedestrian needs, and we needed to do a lot of very quick and rigorous typical section and alignment analysis to keep the project moving along. So we used ORD and working with the district design engineer, conducted a series of highway safety manual predictive crash analyses and evaluated the potential for exceptions or variations along the corridor. Through this analysis, we were able to also develop very high resolution project cost estimates. The results are that we revised the context classification in the southern segment from a C2 down to a C3R suburban residential. We reduced posted speed limits throughout the corridor from 60 miles per hour to 45 miles and 55 miles per hour. We provided 10-foot shared use paths in the southern segment of the corridor, and we worked with the district design engineer and their staff to quickly evaluate and approve proposed typical sections that did not require mainline right-of-way, helping us to maintain that engineering analysis schedule. Under the initial design, which we took to 45% plans and permitting effort, we partnered with FDOT to help us move quickly through the roundabout performance and geometric analysis efforts with both the district and central office staff. We included FDOT reviewers in pre-phase review meetings so that they could understand what it was that was going to come across their desk for review before they received it cold in an ERC assignment. And we partnered with district construction, bringing them into our weekly progress meetings and had additional outside coordination with them to confirm the constructability of our proposed improvements within the existing mainline right-of-way. And through all of that coordination, we were able to reduce the FDOT review effort considerably, and we developed design plans that were able to support the RFP development process, and all the permits were received prior to construction. The next slide kind of shows the improvements that were proposed or being implemented along the corridor. We have a couple of roundabouts, some noise barriers, reduced speed limits, and an improved signalized intersection. And then moving into the right-of-way identification and acquisition portion of the process, we did not need mainline right-of-way, but we did need a number of parcels for off-site drainage facilities. And we all know that the acquisition duration of those parcels had the potential to affect that design build construction schedule. So we partnered with FDOT to bring the right-of-way staff into our weekly progress meetings so that we could better understand the right-of-way acquisition process and allow those folks to help inform our design decisions as we progressed. And Department right-of-way legal and OEM staff got together and determined that they could advance right-of-way acquisition for this project. So we added a title search consultant to our project team. And then as the District 1 conducts what they call 210 meetings as they begin to review parcels that are identified for acquisition. So in advance of the 210, we have a pre-210 meeting kind of to go parcel by parcel with the right-of-way staff so that we could all understand what those issues are. And then we worked with right-of-way to help prioritize the acquisition of those parcels so that we could support the safe and logical construction of the project. So through all of that partnership with District Right-of-Way, we were able to realize a lot of efficiencies in that coordination and the subsequent review and acquisition process. The right-of-way activities began prior to LDCA through advanced acquisition, and the title search and acquisition efforts were scheduled to support the construction phasing with large drainage facilities and layout areas prioritized for acquisition. The department brought on a consultant to assist with the development of the design build RFP, and the RFP was developed to encourage innovation in the design build process while supporting our project goals to widen the roadway, address safety, and hit that construction timeline. So we worked with the district's RFP design build consultant and district construction to help develop the very tight RFP that was written. In that process, it was determined that we needed to increase the level of geotechnical investigations for unsuitable subsoil materials, and a risk register was added, which helped to reduce risk to both the design build contractor and the department. The results of all of that coordination were that we developed construction plans that supported low cost construction bids, very tight competitive bid process. The bids came in within less than 1% difference of each other. So by partnering with FDOT in the ways that I've outlined here, we were able to maintain that aggressive schedule, and our project is currently in construction. So, to get there, we had to begin with the end in mind. We knew that every project is different, and we got with our FDOT partners and our consultant team to explore what opportunities this particular project had for us, and that required strong commitment from both the consultant team and the responsible department staff so that we could rapidly make decisions and address action items as they came up. As I've hammered in, we had weekly progress meetings with appropriate technical information supplying and key decision-making staff in attendance. We had to be very knowledgeable of the department processes as well as all of the applicable policies and procedures. And when we overlay all of those processes, policies, and procedures, we begin to look for the areas of opportunity where we can explore those efficiencies. And we took a big picture approach to environmental analysis while appropriately and quickly increasing the degree of engineering analysis. Next slide. And so here we are in September of 2024, and construction is underway.
Amazing. Thank you so much, JJ. And we do have a question for you from Brian. Thank you, Brian. So JJ will get you that question. But moving right along, yes, let's give him some support here. Isn't everybody doing a great job today? We're getting some fantastic information. Thank you so much, JJ. And now we're going to move directly into our final theme for today, which is environmental. So if we could have Amy Streelman from Janus, right, Amy?
Yes,
Did I say
correct.
it right? Okay, good. All right, take it away.
Okay, thanks. I guess best for last. Hi, I'm Amy Streelman with Janus Research. And this afternoon, we're covering this unusual and noteworthy project that was completed in 2022, the rehab of the old 7 Mile Bridge. And before we get into the project and its challenges, I just wanted to acknowledge we were partnered with FDOT District 6 for this project and worked very closely with Pablo Orozco, Craig James, and former environmental supervisor Barbara Colhane. So I just want to kick this off, and we'll have a really short video clip.
Yes, and while that's buffering, if anyone has issues with the audio, yeah, because we're going to let it buffer for a second. No. If anyone has issues hearing the video audio, just check your settings because sometimes the videos can come in through your computer instead of through your headsets if anybody's wearing headsets. If you still have issues with the audio, we can see what we can do when we release the PDF of the presentation to get the location of the videos in. Anyway, just wanted to give that disclaimer, Amy. Sorry.
Okay, I hope this is going to come up. It's just a quick video clip of Stacy Miller, the district secretary, from the opening of the bridge in 2022.
I think projects like this really bring the community together. These are opportunities to provide not just traditional transportation, but non-traditional transportation, like prosperity, that community cohesion, its history. This project actually has a little bit of everything associated with it.
Thanks. Next slide. So just a quick overview. Again, this is the location of the old 7 Mile Bridge, and really, it's a 2.2 mile portion of the overall old 7 Mile, the historic bridge between Knights Key and then this historic district of Pigeon Key. This blue indicates where the portion of the bridges that we're talking about just off the city of Marathon. And this was, again, a project through DOT District 6 with contributions from Monroe County. Next slide, please. And just a quick historical overview, because again, this is just a landmark, the Key West extension of the Flagler Railroad, constructed between 1905 and 1912. It was, again, it's 128 miles, including 23 bridges, which are still extant. There were 3 major hurricanes during the construction of the Key West extension: 1906, 1909, 1910. And at $50 million, this was the largest privately funded infrastructure project in the world at the time. And so what we are dealing with for this was the old 7-mile bridge, which closed the 7-mile gap between Marathon and Little Duck Key. Of course, this was extremely complex in terms of engineering, very innovative, had to be built in 4 portions that utilized different span types: steel girder deck spans, concrete arch viaduct, and also there was a metal truss swing span over Moser Channel. And then the original bridge in its entirety crossed over Pigeon Key, which was an FEC staging area and camp. Next slide, please. Evolution of the bridge. So the Overseas Railroad was severely damaged by a deadly hurricane in 1935 on Labor Day. And at that point, after all the damage, the FEC Railway abandoned the railway. In 1936, the state of Florida purchased the railway right-of-way, and then there was a movement to go ahead and start converting the rail bridges to vehicular use. And so you can see here in the picture the conversion and expanding the beams to support the widening of the railroad to a roadway bridge. In 1986, the FDOT transferred title of the historic Keys bridges to the Board of Trustees of the Internal Improvement Fund, and FDOT does retain ownership of the 2.2-mile segment that we're dealing with, the old 7-mile bridge from Knights Key to Pigeon Key, and FDEP manages the remaining historic bridges through a lap. And y'all may have seen some of the historic bridges that remain as fishing piers. They're, again, very much used as part of the trailway and for fishing and other recreational activities. So the path to rehabilitation. This is where it got complicated, because the old 7-mile bridge is National Register listed. So is the Pigeon Key Historic District. And so in order to avoid adverse effects, the restoration or rehabilitation needed to meet the Secretary of Interior standards. And then we had the ramp also that went down from the bridge to Pigeon Key. That was a historic resource as well. And so there were, in 2004, some initial efforts to develop the project, and there was going to be some partnership with Monroe County, and that that became a challenge. And so the project stalled for a bit, and then the condition of the bridge was getting to a point where it could no longer have trolley use, which was, they were using that to carry people over or supplies. And so the FDOT needed a ferry and was funding a ferry to get those materials over to Pigeon Key. And eventually it was closed to all public use because, again, the condition was poor. And also there was the Knights Key underpass project that was taking place on the southern end. So this is kind of this showing the track we were going through. So cultural resources consultation. This was so key in getting the project approved and permitted. So again, we mentioned the old 7 Mile Bridge and Pigeon Key, those the historic district, both listed in the National Register of Historic Places. So we had to bring together the partners such as the Florida Division of Historical Resources, which many of you all have probably worked with on projects, also for federal projects known as the State Historic Preservation Officer. They had their architects perform reviews of the plans at 30, 60, 90, and 100, provided comments. Unfortunately, throughout that whole process, there was found to be no adverse effects to the project. We continued consultation throughout the process, and again, Janice helping facilitate this with the department. During construction, issues would arise, such as the rivets that needed to be replaced on the bridge. They no longer manufacture those, so we needed to come up with something that had the appearance, but maybe weren't exactly the same as the historic ones. We see here the beams that were used historically for railing. Of course, those did not meet any kind of standards, but this was historic materials and had been installed historically. So working with, again, the Division of Historical Resources, trying to come up with solutions to some of these challenges. Paint colors, painting the Pigeon Key ramp also, all these things we worked with. This was like often communications, trying to keep this going and meeting the concerns of DHR and also the locally affected parties that were brought together throughout this. Pigeon Key Foundation, Friends of Old 7 Mile. Okay, so here we go. Challenges. Again, meeting the Secretary of Interior standards. This was a highly visible project. This is the old 7 Mile Bridge is very well loved and was used, for sunset strolls. I mean, everybody just loved this project or loved the bridge and really felt strongly about the project. The unknown condition of the bridge components, the I-beams, the rivets, the railings, new railings, all these were things, again, as I previously discussed, that we needed to work through during the rehabilitation, how to appropriately address these historic materials and changes while still meeting the Secretary of Interior standards. You can see that construction methodology was very important because of the environmental sensitivities, National Marine Sanctuary, and so barges or platforms. And so that was a really important part of the project. And then maintaining connection with Pigeon Key. So again, being able to access supplies and emergency responders. And so that's where, again, this continued ferry service was necessary. Next slide, please. Okay, so the project outcomes. With the cultural resources consultation, working very closely with the DOT and then the agencies and the locally affected parties, again, the outcomes were to restore access to Pigeon Key, continue to accommodate the pedestrians and bicyclists and enhance that pedestrian experience, but also ADA compliance and safety, which is, as you all know, becomes very difficult with historic resources. Of course, the preservation of the significant old 7 Mile Bridge, and then the ramp getting down to Pigeon Key and not affecting Pigeon Key. This was of great importance because this is a landmark in the Keys and at a statewide and national level. So the care that was taken to address the features and overall appearance of the bridge, this was a great success. The department and Janus Research received a Prudential Productivity Award for this project. So of course, it was great to be recognized. Some takeaways, I think probably a question would be, what, would be the, there are often times where historic bridges do need to be removed and replaced. And, that's another process where, unfortunately, historic bridges do need to be demolished and, going through that whole Section 106 process and perhaps documenting the bridges with like large format photography and markers. Those are sometimes that's the alternative if a bridge cannot be rehabilitated. But in this case, there was great care taken to rehabilitate this segment of the historic bridge, and a lot of great goodwill built with the community because this was just such an important part of the community. So I think that's it, unless anybody has any questions.
No questions. No questions from the audience yet, Amy. Another great
Okay.
presentation. Yeah, let's give a round of applause for all of our consultant presenters today. Thank you all so much. And when we do release the PDF of this, Amy, I know we were heading so fast through, all of us. We went straight through your second video. So she even had a
It's
second
okay.
video on that. So we'll be sure to include that. But for time's sake, let's keep going along and keep that applause going, everybody, because we're going to introduce again the one, the only Jennifer Marshall with OEM updates.
Siobhan, like who could, say anything about an introduction like that, right? Hi, everybody. I'm excited to give you some OEM updates. So let's just keep this party moving right along, shall we? Next slide. So we have had a lot going on since we last talked to you all in the spring. We've just had a PD&E manual update that came out in July of this year, really a little bit August, but close enough to July. And it removed the swap process essentially from that was the biggest change, and then we had some other changes. Noise costs were updated and some additional planning consistency information was provided. There was an email sent out through contact mailer that discussed all of the changes. I'm sure you all got it, but if not, feel free to contact our office and we can get you some of that information if you desire. We do have another PD&E manual coming up later in 2025, and that's going to be a pretty big one. So when we get together again for our spring industry forum, we'll be talking a little bit about that update, giving you guys a heads up, and so that we're talking along the way of what's changing. A lot of those changes will be in regard to what's going on with CEQ changes, some process changes. And I don't want to, I know I don't have a lot of time, but one of the things that I wanted to tell you all in the consultant industry in particular, I believe that the districts and our staff know this pretty well, is it's very important to me, looking at our program as a whole, that we are doing what we're saying we're doing in the manual. So, I mean, we all need the flexibility to make the choices that we make. But if we're really not doing a process or we're doing it differently, then we need to make those updates. So not only will you see another PD&E manual update coming, we'll also have an ETDM manual update. So we're very excited about working with our districts and with some of you all in the industry to make those things happen. So I just mentioned that the NEPA Phase 2 rules came out in July. All of the agencies who deal with NEPA have a year to put together their implementation plans. So we are in close coordination with Federal Highway about what their implementation plan may be. We don't have any information at this time, but I can tell you that we have been tracking this for a year before these rules came out, and we've already slowly started making the updates, so we shouldn't see any dramatic changes to our processes. We had a great time in Hollywood at the Transportation Symposium. We will be having a good time again coming up here in November. We'll be talking about some hot topics in PD&E, which all the topics are hot, so how can you, not come to that one? Planning consistency and talking about PD&E and alternative delivery. And what's going to be great for y'all at the Orlando Symposium that was a little different from Hollywood is that now we kind of understand a little bit more about phase design build or modified phase design build. When we talked about it in Hollywood, we just learned about it the day before. So I'm going to tell you, these are things that you don't want to miss. And our joint monitoring plan or event is ongoing with Federal Highway right now, and it's going really, really well. We'll be able to share those results with you all when we connect with you again in the spring. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we talked about in the previous industry forum was getting together a QA QC advisory team, and that team has already had a couple of meetings. Here are the members from both FDOT and the consultants. We are having a bit of a change with the FDOT members. Uh, um, and so we'll announce that to you upcoming. I don't want to give away all our surprises right now, but I will say that this has been a very fruitful partnership, in my opinion, so far. One of the things I said at the very beginning is that we need to be able to have some tough conversations, even if it's things that we may not want to hear. On any side. So in the last discussion, we had a lot of feedback on um, OEM's review approach, which we are processing, talking about, and coming up in our next meeting. We're going to follow up with some contextual questions so that we can dig a little deeper and see how we can improve this process overall for consultants, the districts, and OEM. Next slide, please. Um, and with the success of this advisory team, I'm really excited to see what other future collaborations we can do in that way. So we completed self-assessment for this past fiscal year, number 7, and here's a quick summary of what we came up with. Planning consistency updates, that also went into the manual. So I know planning consistency is becoming a bit difficult in projects. Understandably, we have more funding sources than we've ever had before with IIJA, some shifting rules here and there. And so planning consistency has become more complicated. There actually has been a change that's made it different. So we're trying to work through reflecting that in our reference materials and our coordination with Federal Highway, our coordination with the MPOs, and also in the PD&E manual. So we did put some guidance up. I recognize that we need to make some updates to it, so you'll see a revision to that planning consistency guidance for NEPA practitioners coming within the next couple of months. But also we are working with Federal Highway, so they will be updating their guidance directly from them to us as well as to the MPOs. So stay tuned for more of that. From our noise assessment, looking at the recommendations in PD&E versus design, report templates for going into the noise report addendum. I hope that that is the correct. I get a little acronym weird sometimes, but I hope that is the correct acronym. So for that noise report that we prepare in design, we're looking at what potential report templates may be useful for the use in the consultant industry as well as for our districts. We as a result of our assessment of the consultative reevals, we have been able to expand their use with additional coordination with the district. So that will help with some time on some of our project schedules. And that we're going to work with making sure that everyone is aware of the appropriate backup documentation that needs to go into SWEPT for the species keys and PA backup for type 1s and NMSAs. So next slide, please. All in all, a great self-assessment. We're really looking not just at places where our program can be stronger, but we're also looking at ways that if something is working for us, let's expand the use of it, because now we have proven that the risk is a low risk. And overall, we have a mid to low risk program, which Federal Highway agrees with. So congratulations to all of you for contributing to that as well. Just to give you a highlight, in 2024, we were busy. We had 776 total approvals between state and federal documents, 555 federal approvals. So we were rocking and rolling. A lot of this had to do with some moving Florida forward projects that we were able to support the districts in pushing out. But as always, type 1 CEs, even at the national level, are really the highest area of documents that we're putting out. So great job to all of our districts and their supporting consultants for the great job that you do in keeping our program moving forward. Next slide, please. So we've had quite a few questions about what's going on with 404 permits and environmental permitting. As you all maybe are, I'm sure you're aware of, in February of this year, FDEP's 404 program was vacated by a federal judge, and we've had to pivot pretty much all of our projects to the Army Corps. In doing this, we now regularly meet with the Army Corps as OEM for to provide a statewide perspective for the projects that we are requesting 404 reviews from. Um, so since essentially March of this year, we have, or currently I should say, we have 63 404 permits in review with the Army Corps of Engineer, and since March we've had 31 permits issued. We're averaging roughly 6 permits a month, and 8 of those permits were previously with DEP, but we're moving those permit requests along as quickly as we can. Next slide. And I do have to say that our Army Corps partners have been just absolutely wonderful in supporting us and making sure that we can all get through this together. So they have had an increased workload and some compressed schedules. Those are challenges that we are continuing to work through. I did say that OEM permits team meets with the Army Corps reviewers weekly to go over statewide priorities. That does not stop the districts from having pre-app meetings and individual project discussions with the Corps, but it does help for us to monitor, to have enhanced communication, to monitor what the workload is, to make sure we can try to head off concerns before they grow into something bigger, and communicate with all the appropriate groups, whether it be a district's director because a letting is affected, work program, you name it. And we also want to make sure that we're monitoring the workload to see if we need to add an additional reviewer. We want to go ahead and get that process going as soon as possible because it does take time. So we are making a lot of progress in this area, and we'll just keep on moving to the best of our ability. Next slide. So the next couple of slides are going to talk about outreach, and essentially we've done quite a bit more outreach than we've ever done with the industry. So this is our third industry forum. We'll have our fourth in the spring. We're looking at what potential topics that could include. If there's any thoughts that you have, please let us know. But some of the things we're following up on are, we've heard your request for process training. We're working through that. I'm going to be very honest with you. We're doing project reviews. We're doing policy updates. We have the same compressed schedules that all of you do. We are doing our best to get training going as fast as we can with the support of our consultants. So it's not that we're not doing it, it's just it's all a part of all of the responsibilities that we have. So we have heard you, and we will be addressing your requests for additional training. And we're looking to work with our workforce development team to see if we can put together a small firm kind of virtual introduction / speed dating date event where we can it's just hard when you're a consultant. I used to be a consultant, and you're a small firm and you cold call a big firm and they're like, hi, thanks, but I'm really going to team with the person I know. So why not give you a chance to meet when you're not just in a pursuit, right? So we're looking forward to hoping in the next year or so being able to put together something like this because we love our small firms and we want to keep them happy and healthy. Next slide, please. So I do know actually what the next slide is. It is about our statewide coordination, and we have done a lot of it. It's been very important for us here at OEM to get out into the community and talk about what we do supporting the environment through transportation projects when we don't have projects. Because when people have feelings involved or they have some kind of attachment to a project for whatever reason, that is going to skew what our conversations are going to be. When we can give them a broader perspective of how much we actually do at FDOT when we're really telling our story, that helps to reset the stage a little bit more for us and for the consultants that work with us. So this past fiscal year, we went to over 20 workshops and conferences, not to mention the events like the archaeology open house we held here in central office to introduce folks to what we do in cultural resources, and the videos that we put out, like connecting with Broketail and the Florida in Motion um, podcast that we had with the secretary. It just helps get our messaging out there about what we do as environmental professionals. So, or environmental project management, et cetera, professionals. So, in addition to the other things that I mentioned that we're doing, we are also doing this outreach to help promote what we do in this industry a little bit more. And so, next slide, we have also taken our outreach nationwide. And we, Florida, are definitely a leader when it comes to um, our processes and policies, et cetera, and other states being interested in that. So there's just a couple of these that I'll point out. A gentleman from Pennsylvania was driving down one of our roadways while he was on vacation, saw a wildlife crossing, loved it, sent us an email, and now we're having a conversation with Pennsylvania about how we put together our wildlife crossings. The Permitting Council, which is a part of the Office of the Secretary for USDOT, has contacted us about ETDM and SWEPT. We've also been invited to some workshops up in DC regarding our setup with ETDM and SWEPT, so that's been great. And one of my favorite things that happened is that we had a peer exchange with Nebraska DOT. They are working on a portion of their NEPA assignment that they're wanting to get renewed regarding ER, emergency response NEPA. And so they had their federal highway pay for 3 of them to come to Florida with a federal highway representative to talk about our processes on how we deal with emergency response. And I think they just wanted to come to Florida, but also, we had a great time sharing how we do this so well. So kudos to our program for being a national leader in so many ways. Next slide, please. And so going into fiscal year 2025, we're not slowing down at all. We're looking at our next new mini movie to complement the Broketail video. This year is going to be a really big year that we're focusing on workforce development. Especially for us at DOT, we're looking at how succession planning and the retirement of some of our veteran staff works, how we can strengthen ourselves statewide as an environmental management team. So you'll see that focus on us, and that workforce development will bleed into you all in the consultant industry. Strategic updates to our policies and processes. I had mentioned the ETDM manual update, which we will be engaging folks on, as well as PD&E manual updates, some technology enhancements going with SWEPT, et cetera. I mentioned the training opportunities, and of course, we will continue to do our purposeful outreach. So I know we are running late on time. I don't know if you'd like to continue to have a little bit of question and answer, but I will say that if you have to pop off because you do have other things to do, we so appreciate you joining us for today. I really want to say thank you to all of the presenters who have done such a marvelous job and have given such great work to the department and partnered so well. I loved hearing that over and over again, partnering with the department, partnering. And so we very much appreciate you all. So Siobhan, do you think maybe we could have 5 minutes for question and answer?
Yeah, we can keep it open for as long as everybody wants. I saw somebody laugh at that. Thank you, whoever that was. Thank you. And let's start. So keep those questions coming for Jennifer, and we'll read them out to her when we get them in the chat. So let's start with the 404 process. So what exactly is y'all's role in that at this point? And are the districts and their representatives still allowed to communicate with the Corps directly? Could you speak on that briefly?
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, the districts are still, and their consultants are still communicating directly with the Corps on individual projects. We at OEM are really just taking the information on the projects, keeping a master list of it, and talking with the Corps about timing, priorities, concerns, issues, and making sure that all stays followed up on so that we can keep the program moving smoothly.
Gotcha. And then we've got one from Gail Woods. What is the biggest challenge facing OEM? It's not, you did have a list. Is there one that sticks out as the biggest one?
Wow. Wow, Gail, you went there deep. I think the biggest challenge facing us right now is communication. So, communicating with all of you to come to the forum, the best way we think to do that is through contact mailer. But contact mailer works as well as contact mailer works, right? And we hope that a lot of people are signed up to it. We send out individual emails to the best of our ability. We're working on getting our website updated. It is a huge undertaking just to make that a much better resource for you all. And I'm noticing that when we're talking about projects, if you're a consultant and you've worked on a PD&E maybe 3 years ago, and now you're working on a PD&E again, in that 3 years, I'm going to tell you a lot has changed. And so we're struggling a little bit to make sure that you all stay informed of how some of these major changes are affecting the way we do our business. So we're really trying to work on some better methods of communicating with all of you. And if you all have any ideas, please do share it with us, because we would definitely appreciate that collaboration. And I just want to say Gail Woods is great.
Yeah, don't apologize for your question, Gail. It's a great question.
No, Gail, you're great.
But that's the double-edged sword of evolving so quickly, right? And
Yeah.
being so on the ball with all of those elements. Is that you do have to get it out as well. And then we've got a question from one of your environmental staff on the district level. Nikki asks, is there a date for the ETDM manual updates?
So there's an internal date for us, Nikki, but we are going through to see what changes we're proposing and who we need to coordinate those changes with and how they may affect the way we do work. So we don't have a super solid date right now, but before anything happens, you all will know in plenty of time so that we can give you a heads up on what to expect.
Great. We'll just do a few more questions since we still have some folks on the line. Thank y'all for hanging on. I know this is the fun part, isn't it? This is my favorite part every time. We get Jennifer Marshall live and in person. So what about the last self-assessment? I know that was an earlier slide in your segment. The process changes that you've been implemented as a result of that. What are the status? Like, have those changes already been made, or are they scheduled to be made? How is that working?
So for the most part, we have implemented all of the recommendations from the previous self-assessment, the one that I just mentioned before. Like I said, we do have a planning consistency guidance document out there that I don't want to necessarily take down, because it does have good information in it and it's for NEPA practitioners. There's still information on the Office of Policy Planning's website that you should use as well, but we do see that there's some updates that we need to make, and we're talking and communicating with Federal Highway on what those are. So that's why I was saying you can expect here soon that we'll have an update to that guidance. For the most part, it is reasonable for you to use, just to make it a little clearer on how to handle planning consistency. But yes, our self-assessments, one of our goals is to make them as meaningful as we can to our program. And if we can find some places where we can strengthen the program, we'd rather do that ourselves before it's done in a monitoring event with Federal Highway or someone else. And I do have to say, Federal Highway has been very, very supportive of our program. We appreciate them as partners. And I also want to shout out to the team here at OEM too. They've done a great job in making sure that we're being more consistent across the board.
And then I know you answered part of this question already about the benefit that you're seeing from this outreach, but how are other state agencies able to, like, how do they know to reach out to you? Is there a way, like a specified way?
So one of the things, and I'm really going to give a lot of credit to Katasha Cornwell and to Clark. As well, and Jonathan Bennett from the ETDM side. But one of the things that we've been trying to do is have more meaningful conversations with especially regulatory agencies, right? And so the conversation becomes not just what can DOT what can you give DOT? It's what can we also do with you? Like it's a real give and take thing that's going on here. But we're not just looking at it on a project by project basis so all that pressure falls on our districts. We're trying to look at it from a broader perspective. So now these agencies know this is how FDOT is willing to partner, and then we can help support the districts in when they're doing, I don't want to necessarily say negotiations, but they're collaborations with these agencies so that it can go smoother. It doesn't take so long, that we're not starting with scratch with every agency. We are trying to keep regular open lines of communication with agencies such as FWC, FDEP, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Army Corps of Engineers. We're still working on the water management districts, the National Park Service, NRCS. We're trying to make sure that we have a good open line of communication with all of them. So when you and your projects need something, we can have that extra support to help move your conversations along a little bit better.
Amazing, amazing. That strong foundations definitely makes all the difference. And I know that you had mentioned some upcoming items. This will be probably our one of our last questions. Upcoming training opportunities and items for the consultants to attend. Where will those be sent out? Will they be sent out through contact mailer? Is it on the OEM web pages? Where would be best to get that in?
So I highly recommend everyone sign up for contact mailer. Make sure you're checking environmental when you do that so that you can get our updates. We're going to see maybe if we can get some of these items posted on our website as time goes on and see how that registration works. Can't make any promises, but I do know that we are going to have some engineering training coming up in November, as well as some SWEPT training coming up in November. So please keep an eye out for that. We are going to have some more Army Corps training on permitting coming up soon too, and her team are working on that. So Sylvia just said that they're willing to send that out through ACEC too, so we appreciate that partnership. So yes, just keep an eye out. And like I said, we have heard what your request is for additional training, and we're doing the best that we can to try to get that out, but also making meaningful at the same time for us to move forward. So just more to come.
All right. Well, thank you again so much for your time, Jennifer. And as we mentioned a couple of times throughout the presentation, we're going to PDF this presentation and again get it out to everyone. So you should see that follow up probably next week through an email from GoToWebinar. So with that, Jen, would you like to do the closing or?
I just want to say again, a thank you to our ACEC partners for pretty much being the hosts of this particular forum. And thank you to all of you for continuing to make our state such a strong leader nationally for all that we do.
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone so much for your attendance.
Thank you.